Hello world, I'm Mohit Deshpande, and this is the first part of our two-part advanced Android course, and this is just going to be a quick introduction to that. And so this is the design phase, and we have the design phase and the develop phase, as I mentioned before. And in the design phases, we're going to be using material design, applying it, and this is also where we need to really consider what we want our application to look like. And since this is an Android course, we're going to be looking at a lot of material design. And the prerequisite for this is that you have a little bit of basic material design knowledge of the concepts. And we're actually going to be delving much deeper into material design. And you often see when teaching design, I'll have a browser window open with the Google's material design specifications up in the browser, and then I'll kind of put it on screen or put it off screen so that we can kind of compare what the design specifications say and how we're applying those design specifications. And it's also important to note that design isn't something that's absolute, right? They're called guidelines and specifications for a reason. They're not meant to be always followed all the time, right? So this is kind of where you can also sort of experiment with your user interface. Maybe move things around. Maybe if you don't like some spacing, change the spacing, and just kind of play around with the UI until you see something that looks good. It looks great. And in order to design these screens, actually, we'll have to think of use cases. And I'll go a bit and talk about what use cases are. And we're going to look at a few use cases in just a moment. But I also want to note that this is where we need to make these user experience decisions. So like when I'm designing things like this, like our Blueprint app, feel free to move things around. Maybe you want to use a different icon because you think it's more representative. But the point of design is to make it look great. So because we're doing this advanced Android course is kind of centralized around our app idea, we're going to look at some use cases of our application Blueprint. And just to recap, Blueprint is for all the people that out there who have ever been on a team ever. You know that being on a team is something where you have to keep track of who's doing what, and you have things that you have to do, and you have to keep track of things that maybe your other teammates are doing. You have to keep track of who's accountable for what, what the tasks are there, what the deadlines are. So these are all things that we have to consider, and Blueprint will actually make this a very painless process to keep track of all these tasks and accountabilities and deadlines. So suppose we have Bob, and Bob is a project manager. That's what PM stands for. And Bob is using our Blueprint app. There are a few things that he might want to do with our app, and we're calling these things objectives, for example. So suppose that Bob's a project manager and his boss says, hey, we need to do a new objective. Well, then Bob would want Blueprint to be able to create a new objective. In addition to creation of an objective, Bob would also like to get an overview of all the existing objectives that he's assigned to other people. And from that, what if Bob's boss says, "Hey, we need to push up the deadline for something." Well, from that overview, Bob can edit an existing objective, for example. And Bob would obviously also like to complete an objective. When an objective is complete, you can just say, "Oh, this objective is complete," and maybe we even give the functionality so that Bob can look at previous complete objectives. And we're actually going to do this, yes. Um, so here are just some of the screens, and these screens are taken. These are taken as screenshots from from the actual application when it's built and ready to go. And we'll actually be designing these screenshots. So you see these screenshots here, and we're actually going to be designing these beautiful material design screens, and we'll be implementing that design when we go into the next phase of the development phase. So, as I mentioned before, design is not absolute. If you don't want a button to be, and maybe it's a little too far left or a little too far right, feel free to change these things. Maybe you don't like this color scheme. Well, feel free to change it to whatever you want it to be. I really want you to try to make this customizable to what you want. But for the sake of the development and design phase, for the sake of particularly the development phase, we are going to be making a UI sketch that's going to look something like this so that we can actually go and implement it when we go to build our application. So this is the link to the Google material design specifications. It's a really simple link, google.com/design/spec, and we are going to be really using this very intensively, so I recommend you go to that website and get familiar with how it's laid out. Actually, the website itself is built using material design, so it should be somewhat familiar if you've used a lot of the material design apps on your Android device. But yeah, so we're actually going to be pulling up this website, and we're going to sort of compare side to side, what the design spec says and how we're actually applying it to our design of the Blueprint app. So without further ado, let's get started.